Hey y'all, Katie here with MOMnation, and welcome to another episode of Our Love Story. We know being in a relationship is hard, so Dyanna Eisel, certified couples counselor, and I talk through different tips and tricks to help you navigate your relationship and get through everyday life. While you're here on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe to our channel. Or if you'd like to visit us on YouTube and watch the video, our handle is MOMnation USA. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Our Love Story Q&A for couples, live Q&A for couples, but we are not live. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the show over again. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Our Love Story Q&A with a couples counselor. And we have that amazing couples counselor with us back again. Dyanna Eisel, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing amazing. I love talking with you. I love what we do here. And you know what, Dyanna? I get so much feedback for this show from all of our mama members in MOMnation, especially because now you're a household name. And I just wanted to thank you for being such an amazing resource for our mamas. I know that it is so helpful for our audience out there. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I love being here. It's my honor for sure.
Yay. Well, like we always do, we have a juicy topic to jump into, of course, and oftentimes we will pull from a post in the MOMnation group on Facebook because we have a lot of conversations in there about marriage and couples and relationships and that kind of thing. So we see it quite a bit. And it was kind of interesting because, sometimes Dyanna will find one that she wants to talk about, sometimes I will, but we happen to come together on this one, which I thought was really cool. And that was definitely our sign that this is the post that we need to talk about this month. So I will share that with you. And again, it's an anonymous post, so we're not calling anybody out here. And this was just recently posted in our group. And I'll read it for those of you that are listening to the podcast version. Is it possible to be married and be in love with him, but not happy with him? I've been unhappy for a while. I love my husband and he is so good to me and my child. It's a precious relationship. I was not married to her dad, but I don't know what I really want, whether I want to leave him or stay. He makes me happy, but unhappy at the same time. He's my parents' age too, and it gets me really bad to the point, and it gets to me really bad to the point where I swear he is going through a midlife crisis, even though he denies it. But I don't know if I can handle him always being so depressed and mad or upset at the smallest things. I feel so lost. I wish I could hug her.
No, it's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah. So there's a couple places that my mind goes with this one, right? And I don't know, we don't know the exact age of, either of these people, right? But there's going to be some differences in the way that we communicate and also in our expectations of our roles in the relationship down to gender expectations, right? So there's going to be some inherent differences that maybe haven't been explored or talked about before. One of the things that just popped up for me as you were reading it is, I think he's going through like a midlife crisis, even though he denies it. And so my brain goes to, what did that conversation sound like? And how did that come about into fruition, right? Like, was that a statement being made? Was that a observation being made about like changes in behaviors? Was it concern? Was it during a fight? You know what I mean? And so
was
I
he
kind of
defending
wonder,
himself?
right. Like, so I kind of wonder, like, how did that come about? And if, this mom is feeling particularly unhappy in the relationship, I have to wonder what lens that was coming through on, right? Which, no judgment or criticism. We get upset, we get angry about things, but like, where was that coming from? Was it coming from concern, or was it coming from, again, like we had a conflict about something and like it just, sort of came out like sort of like in a weaponized way, right?
So it might have been the right conversation, but it might have not been the right time.
Sure. And if you think about the word or the words together, midlife crisis, there are no positive connotations attached to that, right? Like
Right.
it's very like, it's made cliche, it's been made into jokes for, generations now, right? Where you see it on, in popular culture, it's, someone goes out and buys a motorcycle, or, does something that's like a quote unquote midlife crisis. But that's not really how it looks, right? It's really more of a question of, am I really like midlife? Like, have I lived half of my life already? What does that mean for me? Have I accomplished the things that I want to?
Right.
Is this the position that I want to be in? Is this where I see me being for, the next, 20 years or whatever? Seeing how your body naturally changes as you age, career prospects change as you age. There's a lot to unpack there with aging in general, right? And so you layer that into a relationship where there might be a significant age difference, and it's really hard to relate to if you're not even close to the same age, right? So it might come across as these behaviors being really offensive or really strange, when in reality, maybe we haven't dug into like the why behind those behaviors, like what's really happening. She did mention in there him being depressed or upset. I think that's a really good place to start biologically, right? So like if he's open to, going to his PCP, having his testosterone levels checked, that is very, very common as men age, usually starting even in the 40s in some cases, where testosterone can go down. And not only does that affect like sex drive, it can cause sleep issues and depression. And oftentimes we totally overlook that could be a possibility. And we go straight for the like, why are you being so grumpy? Like you weren't like this before, right? That should be alarm bells going off that like something is strange, right? So biology would probably be a really good place to start. But I feel like, again, it's got to come from a place of like, sure, maybe we've been having a lot of conflict lately. We've been feeling disconnected. The intimacy hasn't been there, but like, I am concerned for you, not just for me and the sake of our relationship, but for you as an individual. So really encouraging and being curious about what his experience is like and how he's feeling, to try to find out what's going on, right? Now, that's just a small piece of the pie. That's just the biological aspect what he might be going through, but that doesn't mean he doesn't get to be held accountable for his behaviors as well.
Right. That's, I think that it's so giant that you brought that piece up and that you brought it up first, because I feel like that's not something that maybe we think about initially when we're starting to unpack a situation like this. And having being midlife myself, I totally understand those changes, those, one thing that has become a bit frustrating to me in my mid 40s is I can't run like I used to when I was in my mid 20s. And I don't mean run like physically running outside, even though it's probably true too. But my ability to, my capacity is less, right? I get tired more quickly. And that is really frustrating to me. And that was really hard for me to sit back and say, okay, nature, I hear you. And I just need to go with the flow because this is my age. Like this is what happens. And it was very, very hard for me to accept that. Do you see that in your practice? Do you think quite possibly, I know we don't have a ton of content about this particular person, but do you think quite possibly he could be feeling that too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There is a time and a place where someone just thinks about that. They think about their own mortality, right? Where they're struggling with all those things I mentioned before. Like, has he done the things that he wants to do? How does he feel about his career, his meaningful work, his relationships? There's probably a lot of questions and maybe perhaps like regret or fear or hopelessness that are going on too. So that can be contributing to like the irritability or the depression, right? But I don't think it's totally uncommon to assume sometimes when we're in relationships and their behavior changes in a way that's like offensive to us, we almost perceive it as a betrayal sometimes, that like they are doing something to us,
like it's personal. Yeah.
they are going through something, right? You see this a lot in kids, young kids that a child that's been diagnosed with ADHD, right? Before that diagnosis comes along, it's like, why are you acting like this? Why are you doing this? Like, this is so frustrating. And like, we feel like they're doing something to us sometimes, right? But in reality, they're going through something, right?
Yeah.
They're really struggling with something. And so in our relationships, when we feel a shift like that, it almost feels like a betrayal. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you changing? You know what I mean? But really, the alternative is coming from, again, that curious place of like, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, there's something happening here, and I care, and I just really need to understand so that we can do what's best for you, right? So when we talk about depression, when we talk about, you know, those midlife feelings, things like that, let's get the biology part out of the way, right? And let's take a look at like the mental health aspect of it. Again, we don't know the ages of these people, but you know, mental health is really like being, this generation is taking the charge, right? A lot
Which
of
is
like,
great.
yes, Gen Z, millennial, like I'm sorry, Gen X and millennial are really taking the charge, and Gen Z are like running with it, right?
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. So we're really embracing that. Generations before, it's not that therapy didn't exist, obviously, but it really wasn't done a whole lot, right? And so
No.
that's why we're finding a lot in those generations that I mentioned before, a lot of unpacking in their adulthood of things that their parents have experienced and done as parents themselves, right? And so mental health, couples counseling, that sort of thing was not really a thing. And so now we're doing it. So depending on what generation he's a part of, that just might not be like a thing, right? It might not be a thing, but that doesn't mean that it can't be a thing, right? So can we talk to him, and not us specifically, but you know, this mom, like, hey, I'm really concerned for you, like maybe we can go together sometime, or like maybe I can help you find someone just to talk to about like your experiences, because they're very real, and like I can't relate to that right now, right? Like I'm in a different age of you as you, and I can't relate. And so, but I do feel like you getting support through that is really important, right? It's not totally the case that, you know, all men don't want to participate in therapy. There's a lot of fear there, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of societal gender crap that's been fed to us over the past generations, that it's not okay for men to go to therapy or talk about their feelings, right? We've talked about this before in previous episodes. It's like little boys being raised with like, you know, rub some dirt in it, you're fine, suck it up, don't cry, don't be a
Right.
wuss, you know what I mean? And girls are raised with, oh, it's okay, come give me a hug, let's get some ice cream, let's watch a movie, you know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
being taught two totally different things, and then we wonder why we can't talk about emotions as adults, right? So he just might not be looking through a lens of that being a possibility as being support. It might be looked at as punishment. It might be looked at as something's wrong with me. You know what I mean? His perspective could be different. So there is a way to sort of introduce that into the conversation after biology is out of the way, to try to help him explore that himself and feel safe about it too.
I love that. And while you were explaining that, something sprang into my head, and I have an example of it. So back, depending, again, we don't know the ages of these people, but like you mentioned, you know, it's just mere decades ago where this stuff wasn't talked about.
Right.
And could it be possible that this person, for example, may have ADHD and it was never properly addressed, and they have been dealing with it for decades and decades and decades, and perhaps they are, you know, on a medication for depression or something like that, but maybe it isn't correct because they don't have the correct diagnosis. Now, this actually is somebody that's very, very close to me. This actually happened. So this person is in their 60s and was never properly diagnosed. And so went through, I mean, you know, I feel for them so much, because I can just imagine, you know, my son has ADHD, and I can just imagine that not being properly addressed as a child. Why can't you sit down and do your math? Why can't you sit down and eat an entire meal without getting up? And it starts to beat up on us, right? And so now we're developing these trauma responses as we go through life. And now here we are 60 years old. Do you think that something like that could be a factor?
Sure, that could absolutely be a factor. Or even if he's had experiences in the past with therapy too that were negative,
Mm,
right? Like if he was forced to go as a child because he was, acting out or whatever because something's undiagnosed, or it doesn't say in the post, but has he been married before? Was he in a long-term
right.
relationship before? And was that weaponized against him? Or was that like a really negative experience for him? It's something that I see often in relationships where it's not their first long-term relationship, where they've done the couples counseling thing before with their previous partner, and like they have negative experiences. And it's just like, it breaks my heart to hear when people say like, oh, they picked his side, they picked her side, and so we never, went back again. It's going to put a bad taste in anyone's mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we don't even know what his perspective is on therapy, but certainly those are all aspects to consider, but we won't know until we start to unpack that a little bit, or until this mama unpacks a little bit with him.
Right, right. Another thing that comes to mind as being a potential factor, and again, don't know the ages of these people, but could there potentially, be decades between them, possibly?
Absolutely.
And then is the perception of gender roles then different?
Oh yeah.
So if you and I know this isn't the case, but if you and I were 30 years apart or 20 years apart, would we have sort of a different perception of those roles? And how does that kind of play into it?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely going to be some inherent gender differences there. Our society hasn't changed a lot, but we've changed some. I like to think we're getting better. But that's also assuming that he came from a totally nuclear household,
Yeah.
right? From like mom and dad that are married. Like we don't know. We don't know if it was just like single dad, single mom. That's obviously going to change a lot of things. His own personal experiences and trauma are going to, create a different lens there too that he's looking through. But gender expectations as to like what a provider means, we've talked about that before in previous episodes. Like if a man feels like their job as a provider is just to financially provide, but that's it, right? It's likely going to make their partner feel very empty, right? Because it's more than just providing the financial part, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if, a wife's job is to be like, taking care of the home, like what does that mean? Does that mean I take care of everything and the kids, the house, like all of those things? Well, we certainly know that's probably going to breed some sort of resentment, right? Because it doesn't feel balanced. But believe it or not, those are antiquated beliefs of what gender roles are. Again, like we're getting better, but we don't know the age difference there. So, like, is that still something that he subscribes to, right? And that he's struggling with because maybe she doesn't subscribe to that same thing. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? And I know that we're spending a lot of time talking about like what his experiences could be and what he's gone through, all those, these are all like hypotheticals, right? But I certainly don't want it to come across that like, she just has to pivot and adjust to whatever he's doing, because that's
Right.
certainly not the case, right? Like he has accountability here to uncovering some of those things as well, to going to the doctor, looking for resources and things that are available to him, and being accountable for his role in the relationship, whether it's poor communication, poor conflict resolution, all those things he's accountable for too, right? So I certainly don't want to take the accountability off of him.
Right.
But since it's coming from like this mom's perspective, right, we sort of have to consider all angles, right? And that includes her as well. So if she were to reflect, how am I accountable for, you know, I'm observing that he's like always depressed and grumpy and all these things. He treats me well, or he makes me happy sometimes and then not. Like, tell me more. Like, what does that mean? And what is your role in that? You know what I mean? Because a relationship is 50-50. It's not just one person. The other person is reacting to that behavior too. Right. So, how am I accountable? What is my role in this? Right. And stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked about how she can help support him and going to the doctor and like doing all of these things, but at the same time she has to focus on what she's doing and stay in her lane, and he's got to stay in his, and they both have to be equally accountable for what their behaviors are, right? It's not just
Yeah.
a one quick fix thing.
Absolutely. And I don't know if she's already doing this or has considered this or hasn't, but in my experience, I feel like it's so beneficial to she should maybe go and talk to somebody on her own.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
marriage counseling, really beneficial. gosh, I mean, I can't tell you how much it's helped me personally. But speaking with somebody to figure you out and to help you get grounded and to help you understand what's going on for you and why you process things the way you do, I feel like that's the best first step. I mean, what is your take on that? Do you think that that is the first step? Does it depend on the situation? Is marriage counseling the first step? Like, what do you think?
I don't know if there's necessarily a first step. I think they can both happen concurrently, right? A lot of times I see couples in here and I recommend and refer them both out for their own individual counseling, right? Or if the partner is at this time unwilling to participate, that's a really good time for you to go individually, right? So that you can cope with the things that you can't control, which are your partner's behavior, right? And working on yourself. So I don't really think there's a direct like cadence there. I really think it just depends on the situation and where the comfort level is for both people.
And there's some tools that she absolutely, if she doesn't know them already, I feel like she could learn rather quickly in individual counseling to really help her present her most caring, supportive, and just really willingness to want to work this out with the other party. Like she may have uncover some good tools in which to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what's really beneficial too is that maybe taking a look too at like attachment styles too, right?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about that before in previous episodes, but they really do make a difference when you take a look at them and you see like the differences in the relationship. Things start to make a little bit more sense. Like, oh, if I have more of an avoidant attachment style, it kind of makes sense why I behave in XYZ way, right? And so it just kind of gives, that's not the fix all, solve all the things, right? But it does give you a little snapshot of like, oh, that makes a lot of sense why I feel that way or why I think that way. You know what I mean? And certainly, age differences or not, like most often we have different attachment styles in our relationships, right? Maybe that would also help her sort out the way that she's feeling about the future of their relationship. This has been years and I'm just like over it and I don't know how else to like go about my life but to separate and move on? Or is it like, is it anxious avoidance? Is it, I've been pursuing, and he's not responding to me. And so, like, now I don't know what to do. Or is it avoidant where it's like, I've been hurt. And so, therefore, I'm going to put this wall up. And now I can't, like, get through that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, all that to say that I think she would either way, whichever way the relationship goes, she would definitely benefit from individual counseling as well. But hopefully, she can get them both in together and sort of sort some of the stuff out.
I absolutely agree. Is there anything else about this post that stuck out to you that you want to share, or you want to talk through? I feel like with the information that we were given, excuse me, we dove into it pretty deeply, but I know that things come up for you because of your expertise that don't necessarily come up for me. So anything else?
I think the only thing that pops out for me is she mentioned she has a child. And so I don't know how old the child is. Is he 15? Is he 5? That's certainly going to make a difference in the dynamic of the relationship. Why? Well, if he's significantly older and he doesn't have kids of his own, is this sort of a situation that he landed in because he fell in love with her, right? And is this something that like he necessarily saw in his future, especially at this age, right? Whatever age he's at. Was that something that he saw for his future? Is that something that he's having a hard time adjusting with? If the kid is like 5, obviously the younger years are challenging. They're all challenging, right? They all have their different challenges.
They all have their things.
Right. But like having like a little kid, if you're like in your 50s, for example, is going to be different than having a 5-year-old in your 30s. You know what I mean? And so was that, how did that come about? What age was the child when he came into the child's life? How long have they been together? The dynamics around the child too are very curious to me because that could be adding more conflict on too, because we just don't know enough about the child's relationship with him, his past experiences with perhaps having children or not. There's just not enough information there, but that can certainly be a contributing factor to some of the like emotional disconnect that's happening here in the relationship.
Yeah, good point. And see, I'm glad that I asked you because the kid thing I kind of just breezed over and it didn't really stick for me. But yeah, I mean, that could be giant, especially for somebody who has never had kids before. Great point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all know how much, well, those of us who have had kids, we all know how much it's a total game changer. I mean, your life
Absolutely.
is completely different. And
Mhm.
honestly, like until I went through it myself, and I was an older mom, so I had plenty of friends that had kids, you know. I mean, goodness, my mom had a kid when I was 20 years old. So I had, you know, plenty of people telling me, you know, or attempting to prepare me for this. And I thought, I got this. This is nothing. And then kid happened and I felt completely clueless and like I was hit by a bus. And so I feel like, especially as we get older and maybe our capacity is a bit different than it was when we were younger, that's going to hit us different.
Absolutely. If your expectations for this age in your life, you're going to be doing something totally different, but now you're not, you know what I mean? There's some
Yeah.
adjustment that has to be worked through there.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Well, thank you. You're amazing as
Absolutely.
always.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Tell our people, even though I will put it in the show notes, I will also put the link to our episode that we did on attachment styles in the show notes.
Oh, good. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, because I think that was, I mean, all of our episodes are great, but I think that that was a really great one. And I love that you brought it up. And I think that, you know, as you stated, it could be a very, very important factor here. So I'm going to link that to the show notes so that it's easy for our viewers to just click on that and they can get a listen to that. But as far as getting in touch with you, what's the best way for our peeps to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So DyannaEiselTherapy.com, you can schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation, which is super cool. And also, I wanted to put in a little plug here, Katie, that April's giveaway for MOMnation AZ is sponsored by me, and it's really, really good. You're definitely not going to want to miss this one, and you're definitely going to want to enter to win because it is a good one.
Awesome. So I will put in the show notes our page that people can access in order to get in on that. And that is going to be, you said April, so we've got another couple of days that they can access that and that will be up. So awesome. I'm really glad that you brought that up. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's a really good one. So
Oh,
definitely
I'm
don't miss it.
excited. Well, thank you for your generosity. I really appreciate that. And I know that our viewers do too. If you guys want to check out any of our previous episodes, and trust me, you do, because Dyanna and I have been doing this for like over 2 years now. So there's a lot of juicy stuff over on our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. Scroll down just a little bit and you will see our playlist. It is our love story Q&A for couples counselor, Q&A for couples by a couples counselor. And if you prefer the podcast version, hop on over to your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. There you can connect with us. Also, you can connect with Dyanna on her Instagram. Her Instagram is awesome. And she does post our podcast episodes there as well. So if you're just interested in seeing what Dyanna does, go and check her out on Instagram. It is Dyanna Eisel Therapy. That's your Instagram, right?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.